SmackDown Shut Your Mouth improves upon nearly every aspect of the SmackDown series. There's a creative wrestler mode that's really in-depth, allows you to edit a lot of different options for your wrestler. There's a ton of different match types, everything from Hell in the Cell to Survival to TLC to regular ladder matches. There's a Royal Rumble match. But perhaps the most important mode in Shut Your Mouth is the new season mode, which, tremendously expands upon the single-player experience. Basically what you can do, you can either take a created wrestler or one of the current WWE superstars and take it through the entire last season of WWE programming, which started with the breakup of Raw and SmackDown and then co-ownership deal between Vince McMahon and Ric Flair. What's particularly cool about this mode is that it changes depending on the wrestler that you start out with. So if you start out with a high-profile wrestler like The Rock or Chris Jericho, then you'll automatically start feuding with some of the bigger names. You'll get to wrestle in the pay-per-views, and you'll get to wrestle on Raw or SmackDown, depending on which show you've been drafted for. But if you enter the season mode with a created wrestler, then you'll start out with a low number of superstar points, which essentially determine how popular you are. You'll start wrestling out on Heat, and you'll wrestle against some of the lower-tier WWE superstars until you start to work your way up and get more superstar points. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you'll be able to ask either Vince McMahon or Ric Flair for a title shot. You'll start to wrestle on either Raw or SmackDown, and you'll finally get to start to wrestle on pay-per-views, which is important because if you win matches at pay-per-views, then you can unlock new items for the game, such as new moves in the Create a Wrestler mode, special movies, or even new costumes for the wrestlers. Also, the season mode can change depending on the conversations that you have with different characters. For example, if you're in an interview with Michael Cole and he happens to ask you, you want a title shot or don't you want a title shot? If you say yes, then you'll have a much greater chance of getting a title shot within the near future. But if you say you don't want one, then you'll continue to wrestle down with the lower tier guys and wrestle on Heat and in some of the lower profile matches. It's also worth mentioning that the draft, you can either edit it manually or you can let the computer do all of the work. So if you want to have all the rosters appear as they do in current WWE programming, you can do that. Also, you can set stables in the game so that wrestlers can have alliances with other wrestlers. For example, there's the Un-Americans, which is made up of Test, Lance Storm, and Christian. You can choose to edit that if you want, or you can make an entirely new one, which features your created wrestler or any one of the currently existing WWE superstars. There are a whole bunch of different match types in the game. There's the ladder matches, of course, and TLC. But perhaps the most entertaining matches are the hardcore matches, and that's basically because you can go in so many different environments. You can go backstage, you can go into the rotunda area of the arena, you can go into the streets just outside the arena, you can go into Times Square, you can go into the World, which is the restaurant in New York. You can even wrestle in the subway. There's a ridiculous amount of areas to go to, and what's great about them is there's a bunch of different objects to interact with. When you're in the backstage area, you can throw wrestlers through glass, you can throw them up against shelves, and books will come flying off, or other items that come flying off. So the environments don't look stale at all. They're actually quite lively. Even in the street area, there's traffic that flows by and it'll slow down if you happen to bring the fight into the middle of the streets. Some changes have also been made to the TLC and ladder matches. Before, when you climb the ladder, you just basically reach up and eventually grab the belt. Now what happens is when you go up and grab the belt, the wrestler will actually hang from it for a bit. So this gives some time for the opponent to come over and grab the wrestler's feet and hang on and try and shake him from the belt. Also, when you go up on the ladder, you can actually, exchange blows at the top, or you can perform moves. It's pretty cool to see like Chris Jericho do like a submission move on top of the ladder. There's also plenty of different weapons in the game. There's rattan canes, there's fire extinguishers that actually work, there's the traditional steel chair. There's a bunch of different objects you can pick up. You can also even ride the Undertaker's motorcycle around the arena, although it doesn't appear that it actually does any damage if you run into another wrestler with it. The Create a Wrestler mode for Shut Your Mouth is really in-depth. You'll be able to change a lot of the physical characteristics of your wrestler, everything from their face to the type of clothes that they're wearing, to how big their head is, or things like that. And there are also parts in the Create a Wrestler area that will enable you to create some of the wrestlers that don't appear in the game. For example, Rey Mysterio Jr.'s mask is in there, so you can create him really easily, or if you want to create Bret Hart, that's also possible. You can also choose to select between either a pre-existing set of moves, you can choose to copy like The Rock's moves if you want, or you can go in and edit each individual move depending on the situation, so you can decide what your wrestler will be doing in an aerial situation or what they'll do when the opponent is up against a turnbuckle. You also get to decide their wrestling style, and you'll be able to put in points into different attributes such as, speed or power, things like that. And this can actually sort of make a difference in the game because fighting styles actually feel a little bit different. For example, Hulk Hogan wrestles quite differently from someone like, let's say, Jeff Hardy, who's much faster and does a lot more high-flying moves. So you really have to pay attention to that balance. If you want a high-flying character, you can make that happen. Or if you want a slower, more deliberate submission-style character, you can do that as well. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of the Create a Wrestler mode is the Create an Animation feature. This mode is just ridiculously in-depth. You can choose from one of dozens of preset animations and edit them any way you like. For example, if you choose like a kung fu stance fighting animation for your wrestler, you can go in and edit it so that his head will move, or his body will move, or his arms will move while he's in that stance. You can also change the running animations, the walking animations, as well as the winning animation. And there's all kinds of stuff you can do, and it's really impressive to see what Yuke's has been able to do with this mode, because there's just so much freedom to do, a lot of different things. A bunch of different tweaks have been made to the gameplay. The reversal system is actually much more difficult to use now instead of before where it's just, pressing a button as fast as you can to counter a move. Now you actually have to not only press the button, but you also have to guess which direction that the opponent is executing the move with. So for example, if an opponent presses up and circle to perform a suplex, you have to press up and square to counter that move. So there's a lot of guesswork involved, and you'll get penalized if you guess wrong because the opponent will be able to execute the move without any problem. Also, submissions work a lot better. You actually have to go to work on a certain part of the body in order to get a submission to work. So, for example, if you want to get a leg submission, then you always have to go to work on the legs by constantly doing a submission in that area. The graphics have been vastly improved over Just Bring It. The detail on the wrestler's face is amazing. Hulk Hogan actually looks like a withered old man. Booker T will, pop his eyes wide open and his mouth will be wide open when he's up at the entranceway doing his, little introduction move. Likewise, when you're talking to wrestlers face to face, you'll really get to see the detail. Like Ric Flair, he looks absolutely amazing, as does Vince McMahon. Really, Yuke's has done an amazing job with the graphics. The animation in the game also looks fantastic, though there's a lot more canned animation than there was in Just Bring It. This is in part to Yuke's trying to make the gameplay feel a little bit smoother than it did in Just Bring It, and to a certain extent it works, but be prepared to see a lot of, animation where you can't actually control the wrestler or what he's doing. For example, when Hulk Hogan does his little, he gets punched in the face and he goes like that. Be prepared to see that quite a bit, especially since it's a basic move in the game. Yuke's has removed the play-by-play commentary system that was featured in Just Bring It and replaced it with sort of just an occasional comment system provided by Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler. Well, they'll occasionally chime in with a comment about the match saying, well, look, there's the sharpshooter, or, what's going on. It tends to work a little bit better than the play-by-play system in Just Bring It simply because, that system had a lot of trouble with keeping up with the action. Also, all of the wrestlers, with the exception of Maven, have the correct introduction music, which should be something nice to hear for those that purchased WrestleMania X8 for the GameCube, which obviously a lot of the wrestlers didn't have the proper introduction music. SmackDown Shut Your Mouth is easily the best SmackDown game to date. The Create a Wrestler mode is in-depth. The season mode really gives some longevity to the single-player experience. There's a bunch of different match types to choose from, and the graphics are probably the best out of any PS2 wrestling game to date. And the gameplay has been refined so that it blends some of the slower-paced action along with the fast-paced action the SmackDown series is known for. So definitely check it out if you're a wrestling fan.